Hello, and thanks for joining us on Inside the Brackets. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today we're presenting part 2 of our cross-platform War Stories episode, real stories from real developers about their experience building cross-platform apps. Today's episode features Kiran Prasad, Senior Director of Engineering for Mobile at LinkedIn, Brian LeRoux, Principal Product Manager for PhoneGap and Topcoat at Adobe, and Wroblewski, CEO and co-founder of Input Factory and the author of Mobile First. So let's talk about solutions a little bit. It's been my experience that a design team will come in and say, here's this gorgeous interface that we've got in a Photoshop document, and go implement it. And some stuff is really hard to implement, but there could be a way that you work around it that gets the job done. It is 100 times easier to code. I think your example is the Feedly example we talked before. You want to talk about that real quick?
The Feedly example is like one of those classic solve the problem by not solving it. So scrolling used to be really hard in the mobile web. It's not anymore. It's pretty much fixed. But for the purpose of this argument, we'll go back in time when it was completely impossible. And you had to use JavaScript to fake it. And sometimes the execution speed of the JavaScript itself was a little jank. So you'd get bad frames per second, or worse, you'd have a slightly off physics feel to it. So you have this app that feels a little bit weird and jank. And Feedly just couldn't get around this. And the way they dealt with it was pagination. So the gesture for scrolling is to go like this, and so is pagination. So they would just take 4 items and then throw that up like a card, and then they'd show another 4. And it was fast, and it was easy to implement. It didn't require a bunch of crazy JavaScript, and it solved their problem. Mm-hmm. And the moral of that story isn't to, do pagination. The moral of that story is to use your interaction design skills and teams and UX design thinking to take the constraints and embrace them and create the best design and experience possible with the environment you're in, which is limited sometimes.
Agreed.
We have a rule that I established a little while ago. I'm mostly product design guy. Like, kill the spinner.
Yeah.
Never want to see a spinner.
Never want to see a spinner.
And they're like, well, why? Don't you want to tell people things are happening? They're like, no. It's like you go into the doctor's office and you're waiting for the doctor, right? And somebody shoves a clock in your face and it's just ticking. Is that going to go faster or longer for you? And that's what a lot of these animations are like. They're calling attention to the fact that you're sitting around and waiting for something to happen. Because we use a technique like skeleton screens, where we sort of have a fake background in the background, and we're just loading like little bits at a time. So it feels like the page is there, and then just little parts sort of come in, and you never end up seeing a spinner. And instead, you just see the interface gradually
It's positionally
build.
accurate, so it
yeah,
feels
it's
like
positionally
it's
accurate,
in.
and things fill in, and you gradually see them fill in, and what have you. And the end result is it's a very responsive experience. You never feel like you're waiting, and it feels fast and fluid.
We've certainly talked about lots of issues and some things that you guys have done. So, one of the things that's come up is APIs and separation of concerns.
Yeah, definitely. I think doing that, like we actually went through a process where we went through and we identified what we call all of our sort of like super blocks, which are our main objects at LinkedIn. So for at LinkedIn, that would be like your profile, your companies. Like we named all of them. There's like 25 of them, and we said, okay, like those have to have resourceful REST APIs to get to them. Like that was step 1. And just doing that and trying to extract it was like years of work.
This is why those sort of what are they called transcoding companies are so big.
Yeah.
Because they'll go and be like, look, don't touch your desktop site. We're just going to run a script on it and transform it into a mobile site. Ta-da, done. Right? And they're basically selling a mobile solution based off of your existing desktop site. Now, those desktop site or those mobile sites are not very good because they're being run through literally like a parser that extracts the content and shoves it into some kind of template. They're not really designed and thought through very well. But a lot of people are doing it because they don't have these technologies in place and their back end is a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because the model that we're talking about now, we separate our concerns and we actually build a real service-oriented architecture, and we're probably marshaling lightweight data types instead of like heavy type data, so we're probably chucking JSON around, or in some cases we're pre-rendering. I wonder like if you could get the same kind of performance out of just building a different HTML UI every time and still treating that back end totally divorced from the front end. Like I think it should be anyhow, and I think it's totally acceptable to like go native or not, but it's an interesting like paradigm because you are seeing these new devices be thrown at us every week. Like we got glass, now we got watches. What's next? No one knows.
I advise people to default to a web-first approach, a mobile-first approach, because they probably don't have a big team, they probably don't have numbers to look at, and going native, they'd have to pick a platform they don't know when to pick. So if they start with a mobile-first web approach, then they can get all of that information and start to get their back end in order. And then going to like a native application that talks to those same services is almost like an optimization of their overall system. And I see going native first without knowing exactly what you're doing is kind of a premature optimization.
Interesting.
Is that
I don't know if I agree with
There's
that.
the one thing I would say that you said, they probably don't have the data. And in any business situation, if you don't have the data, your first to do is to go get the data. Because before you make any decision at all, like don't make a decision based on watching the show. Don't make a decision based on what the New York Times told you to do. Go understand your market and get your data first, because it may turn out that Android 2.3 is super important for you, and if you want to get the best experience there, you're going to build it native.
So I look at it a little different. Like if you, it depends on your business. I feel like if a lot of your business is driven through email clicks, I think building mobile web might be a great way to get to it, or email, or sort of like social network clicks, like coming off of Facebook streams, LinkedIn streams, that type of stuff. It might make sense. If your business is built around people organically coming there and interacting with it because it's a tool or a capability or a solution for somebody, I don't think mobile web is the first way to go. I think an app is the first way to go. And mobile web really won't give you any data. In fact, because the probability that the person is going to launch the browser and type in the .com domain name or create a bookmark
Doesn't happen anymore.
is just not going to happen. So,
yeah, but there is a huge amount of linking into things. It's not like
you're linking. I think this is what I mean by the two types of sort of solutions. There's, like, people rarely link into Facebook. They use Facebook to link into articles and stuff like that. So if you're a company who happens to be a publishing company and you have articles like the Financial Times, yeah, mobile web might be a great way to start and distribute stuff out. If you're Gmail, I'm not sure the mobile web version of Gmail is like the
you're not
primary.
linking into Gmail.
You're not linking.
The way I would sort of explain this in even simpler terms, to me, the web is about reach, right? Whereas native is about richness. And there's different factors that play into this. But if you look at our application today, when you look at our distribution, right? So it's like, here's our cumulative growth within the native app. We don't have like a big viral loop in the native app. But on the web, it's like, because we have figured out a growth story there and everybody can hit it from any particular kind of device. So we have that chart in terms of distribution, right? Like how many people are we reaching? Web, we're reaching way more than we're reaching in the native app. But then you look at total engagement, it's the exact inverse chart. So that's what I mean by richness
It's a good 5 to
versus
10x
reach.
more.
At least, if not more than that.
In your case, and is that Polar?
Yeah.
So in Polar's case, it's a flanking strategy. You're taking both sides.
Well, we use the web to get the reach and to bring more people into the native where the richness happens. So if we're going to reach 1,000 people, we'll get X number of them into the app, but the ones that we get in there really do a lot for us. So it makes sense to play both. You probably need to think about how to connect them and where, what kind of behavior are you incenting in one versus the other.
Interesting. And you guys are seeing the same engagement story at LinkedIn.
Yeah, you can kind of, this is why we've started deep linking into the application coming off of email clicks is if you really look at the web, maybe they're doing a few pages of clicks because they're coming in, they're like, okay, I want to go back to where I was. While with the apps, they're organically launching it.
I would love to run an experiment on this. I'd love to be, like a retailer sends emails, and here's the A/B test. Land you on a mobile web page, see if you convert, push you to download the app, and like it's just a landing page for the email. Go get the app. So actually, can I follow up on that? So what would you do if you were that retailer? You'd do the splash page, or you'd build the mobile site?
I would. It depends on where a majority of my traffic's coming from. If a lot of it's coming from links, from email clicks, I'd probably start with the web. And then build the mobile. If most of my traffic is coming from like SEO, like search clicks, or organic, which means like somebody's typing in like bestbuy.com, then I'd go with the app because SEO doesn't effectively work on mobile. Like people aren't going to Google searching and then trying to find the web solution, so they
People
typically
are going to app stores to find solutions.
I had a really interesting conversation with a guy who will remain nameless. They did some research with people around searching on mobile devices, and I was actually really stunned by the outcome, which is he said people really dislike going to the web browser to do a search.
Yeah. Kids are going to the app store these days to find information. It turns out the app store is the new search engine.
KitKat's actually done something new with the search, the embedded search stuff that you can do into applications now.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
it's cool.
Yeah, you can search on Android, and then like you can have your search results come up, and your app can actually respond with the results based on the query being hit with it.
Yeah,
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the argument against native apps for a long time is like links don't open apps. Well,
Now,
not
starting
only,
to.
not only do they actually open apps, but you can actually search against them now too. At least
Yeah.
with KitKat stuff.
Could you guys just share, if you can, what your testing world looks like when you're working on one of these applications? So maybe start with
Sure.
Luke. Yeah.
So I was just describing, we just redesigned our office to actually pivot around our testing lab, meaning like we have a desk and then 2 tables filled with devices, and then a desk and 2 tables filled with devices. Which sounds like, a ton of work, but the way I generally do it is I will go and hit those devices when we're getting really close to a major release. And we'll test on fewer up front, so we kind of have like a small limited test set, and then right when we're about to push, we'll go look at everything and just make sure that there's not anything broken in all those different places. And even for the iOS app, there's like 5 or 6, just for the iPhone app actually, there's like 5 iPhones that we look at stuff now on. Because there's Retina, non-Retina, there's 3.5-inch, 4-inch, there's 64-bit, non-64-bit, which you wouldn't think makes any difference in the world, but actually there's all kinds of wacky things that don't work the same way on 64-bit versus, like UI. One that we noticed, which is really strange, was like touch targets were off. When we moved to the 64-bit phone, a lot of our touch targets weren't responsive, and we had to just go in and like manually blow them up a bit. So we got Retina, non-Retina, size, and OSs. So we're supporting 5, 6, and now 7. And then you do the combination of those. That's how it adds up to like 6 or 7 just iPhones.
You're still supporting 5.
What about you, Brian?
It's complicated. So due to the nature of PhoneGap, there's many devices, and we've got a wall of phones, and we've automated connecting to it with a system we call Medic. We compile a version for every phone. We force push these installed apps onto all the phones. The apps all launch, and then they launch a web view, which runs our unit tests, which then posts the results back to a couch, which we then aggregate the results from, and we can find out if PhoneGap works. Lately, in most of our team, we tend to just test on the lowest end acceptable device. So I use a 4S for my iOS testing. I've got like a last year's Nexus that I use for my Android testing. That's kind of how I do it while I'm building stuff. If it works there, presumably it's going to be okay on the newer devices. Obviously not always true. And the last little bit that we've been experimenting with is Appium, which is from the same guys that do Selenium, Sauce Labs. It's really cool, and I recommend anybody that's doing mobile check it out. It's a nice way to do test automation.
We use this as well. We use Appium for our test automation. I'm
thinking of actually moving a lot of our stuff over to it, because right now we're a lot of duct tape and Band-Aids, and we want this whole thing as automated as possible. So Appium seems to be solving that better than we're ever going to do. And
They're doing a really good job with that. So we try to do about 12 releases a year for mobile, at least for the apps. And so there's like a heavy testing cycle right when you're about to do a release. And then there's sort of like ongoing testing as you're running. I think one of the key things we did that I would really recommend other people to do is we actually made the base unit of our test an action as opposed to like a screen or a page. This was super important. I didn't realize it when we made the choice, but it's had a huge impact for us. So if you make the base unit an action, you now know exactly the set of actions that are on that page, and you can sort of play those actions. And a sequence of actions is effectively a flow. And we can actually measure all of the metrics for our users, and so we know what the top flows are. So we automate in the order that our users tend to use the flows, just by like metrics distribution. And so on every check-in, a suite of flows is run, which is effectively a sequence of actions. And if anything breaks, then you'll sort of know. And breaking is 2 things. So one is we actually do, for every run, we take screenshots of every screen after every action click.
You're going
and
that
then,
far.
And then we compare the screenshots against the previous run. And if there's more than a 5% image diff, then something broke. That's one thing that we do. And then as we get closer to the major releases, I mean, we still have manual testing. So we do a large amount of sort of manual testing. It usually takes about 3 days to run our full sort of manual regression suite. We also do what we call bug bashes. So we usually bring pretty much like the entire team together, like 100, 150 people. That's not just engineers, but like literally everybody, marketing, whatever, for about a 2-hour period. and it's just like use it and tell us what's broken.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of like automation that's very metrics driven to like, you know, black box manual testing to like ad hoc random set of people just poking at it until it breaks.
One of the underlying themes that I don't think we've actually called out, although it's come up a few times, is like massive amounts of data. It sounds like all three of you are really looking at lots of data and making decisions based on that. You know, which hopefully would help deal with sort of massive complexity
I think the thing, though, it's important, like especially with more devices and trying to keep simplicity, to not become data-driven, but to become data-informed.
Yeah, I think the way we do it, we're trying to look at it as the data is for the execution part, but there still has to be a vision strategy part.
Yeah.
And those are totally separate things.
Yeah. It's hard to find that balance.
We're a startup, so there's a heck of a lot more flying by the seat of our pants than with your guys' world, right? That said, you know, what we tend to find is our metrics actually don't keep up with the rate of change in our business. So we'll, you know, make an adjustment, and all of a sudden, like 3 metrics that we're tracking pretty actively in our dashboard, we really don't care about anymore. So that's kind of a challenge. But, you know, some base level of instrumentation, I think, can help inform your decision. So we even from the get-go when we launched, we've got data coming in. It's just a question of which are the specific numbers that we really care about the most and where do we start optimizing. When you're a small startup, bigger swings and sort of more radical changes is actually probably more likely to help you swing in the right direction than like small niche little updates.
That's all the time we have today. Thanks to each of our guests, and thanks to you for joining us for Inside the Brackets. Be sure to join us in the coming months as we explore topics like cross-platform performance and real-world stories about enterprise development. See you next time.